Well, good morning, Mount Gilead. It is really, really good to be here this morning. And if I can just say for anything else, I am a huge fan of Jeff Fall, aren't you? We should start a fan club. I believe Jeff is one of the best preachers in the country. And, not many churches can say week in, week out, they get inspired and challenged and directed from the Word of God. And we are a blessed congregation because of his leadership, are we not? And really, I would say that about all the staff. I would say that about all the elders. We are a blessed church for the leadership here. And we're so thankful for the men and women who lead in this place. Michelle and I are thankful to be here. This morning, I want to start with a question. And it's a question that I think we've probably been asking for this entire series. And the question is this: have you ever been to that place in your life when things didn't really go as planned, and you find yourself in a place you never thought you would be in? And have you ever asked this question, how did I get here? I mean, what happened in my life? How did I get here? For 10 years, I served as an associate minister of Plainfield Christian Church. And then in 2011, I was called by First Christian Church in Columbus, Indiana, to become senior minister there. And we moved there in 2011. We loved that church. We loved that city. Me and Michelle, my wife, and my 3 kids, we were enjoying a great season of life. And then in 2014, I had developed some headaches. I was coming off of another medicine, and so I went to my doctor. I was having some pretty severe headaches, sort of like migraines. If you've ever had migraines, you know how terrible they can be. And I told my doctor about it, and he walked me through that, kind of talked me through that, and gave me a couple of different medicines to try. And one of those medicines was hydrocodone, or Vicodin, as it's commonly known. Now, I'd been prescribed Vicodin before for a couple of minor procedures, and I'll be honest, I always liked the way those pain pills made me feel, but I could always get off them when I was supposed to get off them. But this time was different. This time, when I took those first couple of pills, I wanted the whole bottle. And basically, that's what I did over the next few days. I went through them pretty quickly, felt great for a few days. The problem was, after a few days, I had another headache, but I didn't have any more pills. And so I called my doctor, and I told him about it, and he just wrote me a prescription for more. And that pattern continued over the next several months. I would run out of my pills pretty quickly, and I would call my doctor, and he would fill my prescription. I would get some more. He would up the dose. This just kept going and going. 6 months later, and after taking pills almost every day, along with another daily prescription for Xanax, another highly addictive drug for anxiety, I was hooked. And the problem was that my prescription wasn't cutting it anymore. At the same time, in Columbus, I had gotten to know another young man who had a drug problem, and I had shared with him in the midst of our conversation that I thought I had become dependent on my pain pills. And what happened next led me to a crossroads in life. He told me that he knew someone that had extra pain pills and that I could buy them if I was interested. You know, along the journey of life, you have these moments that you wish you could go back and redo. I got a lot of them, and I'm going to share several of them with you this morning. My guess is you've got some too. I wish I could go back to that moment in my life and do something different. I wish that at that moment I could go back and that I was honest with my doctor and honest with my wife, honest with myself, and said, you know what, I think I've become dependent on these things. I think I need some help. But that's not what I did. I had too much pride. I thought I was in control, and I thought I needed to just keep going with life. I needed to just keep going, keep things together. And so while I wish I could tell you this morning that I did the right thing, I didn't do the right thing. Instead, I started buying pain pills off the street and quickly worked my way up what's called the opioid ladder. Hydrocodone, oxycodone, Oxycontin, morphine, tramadol, Opana. If it was an opiate, I had to have it. In fact, and other addicts will tell you this, that chasing the drug itself became a kind of addiction. It became my number one priority in life. And here's what's so crazy. Like, I had a great church. I had a lovely house. We were financially stable. I had an amazing wife, 3 incredible kids, tons of family and friends. But all of that began to fade as I became completely preoccupied with that drug. My wife would tell you she knew something was wrong. She wasn't quite sure exactly what it was. She thought I was having an affair. And in a sense, that's true. I just wasn't having an affair with another woman. I was cheating on her with a chemical. And I was trying to keep everything hidden. I was trying to keep everything a secret, trying to just keep going, trying to be a dad and a husband and a pastor, just keep going because I didn't have time for a problem like this. And pastors aren't supposed to have problems like this. Well, after a year of this, things had gotten so bad that I would do anything for more pills, which really turned out to be a pretty bad thing because there came a point when my dealer didn't have any more pills, and he didn't know when he was going to get any more. And so because I was desperate, I started kind of freaking out. And he said, man, don't freak out. I got something else for you. Have you ever tried heroin? And of course, I hadn't at that point. But I did know that my pain pills were just a version of the drug, the same drug that was in heroin. They're in the opiate family. And because I was desperate, and because I thought I was in control, and because I thought I could handle it, I started snorting lines of heroin. And using really anything I could get my hands on. My prescription, the pills I was buying off the street, and now heroin. And also the Xanax that I was using multiple times every day. And at this point in my life, things went from bad to worse. Every relationship in my life began to deteriorate. I was faking it as a pastor. I was a terrible friend. My teeth and my body were in bad shape, didn't have any fruitful relationship with the Lord. And my joy for life, which had always been high, was completely gone. And like they say in the 12 steps, my life had become unmanageable. I mean, there I was, 35, a dad, a husband, a pastor, and a heroin addict. On July 26th of 2015, I went to bed. It was a Sunday night, but before I went to bed, I used some heroin. What I didn't know at that point was that my line of heroin was laced with another drug called fentanyl, a drug 50 times more powerful than morphine. And I overdosed. And at 2:30 in the morning, I was in my bedroom. Michelle, my wife, was in the living room. She had a neck problem, so she was on the recliner sleeping. At 2:30 in the morning, our little 8-pound Yorkie knew something was wrong with me. And he went and he peed at my wife's feet to wake her up. And she came and found me unresponsive. She called 911, and the paramedics came, and they administered a dose of that drug called Narcan. It's a drug that reverses the effects of an opiate overdose. The problem was it didn't work. And so they gave me another dose. Thankfully, that dose worked, and I started breathing on my own, started slowly coming back to life. I went to the hospital, and 4 hours later, I was sent home. And I'll be honest, the next few hours and days are pretty blurry in my mind. This was all new to us. This alcohol abuse or drug abuse, we never dealt with this as a family. We didn't really understand what was going on. But I did know this, that something did have to change. It was the first time in all those months of using that I finally admitted, you know what? Maybe I've got a problem. I just overdosed on heroin. Maybe I need some help. And thankfully, help came. 4 days after overdosing, I was on my way up to Minnesota to a 30-day rehab stint in a place called Hazelden, Betty Ford. My parents drove me up there. My dad is Steve, senior minister at Plainfield Christian. He drove me up there and got me checked in, and then right before he left, the last thing I said to my dad was, I cannot imagine my life without drugs. And I didn't. That was one of the worst parts of addiction. And if you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. You don't think you can get better. I didn't. I didn't think I could get better. I didn't think that the joy could return. I thought I was too far below the surface. And I want to pause right there for just a second. I got more to share, but I want to pause right there for a second because I know that that's where some of you are this morning. In a group this size, I know that some of you are looking around at your life right now, and whatever it is that you're struggling with, and you're thinking, how did I get here? And can I even get better? And I want you to hear this morning, that the answer to that question is yes. You can get better, and you can find joy again, and you can overcome whatever challenge you're facing, not because you have what it takes, but because we know the one who does. Friends, we serve a God who is the master at putting broken pieces and broken people back together. The master of reaching below the surface and bringing us up to set us on dry land. He can, He will, and He does. For me, I didn't know how I could live life without drugs. But I'm thankful to share with you today that as of this past July, I'm now 4 years clean from my addiction to opiates and Xanax. So thankful for that. And it does keep getting better. But I didn't get there on my own. And while this morning I want to speak directly to any of you who are struggling with any kind of an addiction, there's also another group I want to speak directly to, and it's the friends and the family, the loved ones of those that are struggling with addiction. It is a tough road. 2/3 of American families have some sort of chemical dependency present. That's a lot of us. And I know there's a lot of people in this room who have a loved one who's addicted to something or is struggling with some sort of substance abuse. And all I would say to you this morning is this. Remember that story of Jesus teaching in that packed house? And you remember as he's teaching, he sees the dust raining down on him from the ceiling. And what that was? That was a sick man being lowered by his friends to get the help he needed from Jesus. And so those of you who have a loved one who is struggling with addiction right now, I know it is tough, and it is scary. It is not the life you signed up for. It is messy. There's no blueprint. But what I would say to you this morning is don't be afraid to grab onto the mat and get that loved one the help they need. And I know you don't always know how to do it, and I know the loved one has to want help too, but don't give up the fight. And don't be afraid to get that loved one the help they need. Don't be afraid to pick up the mat. Now, life got better, but before it got a lot better, my life actually got a lot worse. I've told you that the part I've told you so far is actually the easiest part for me to tell. The second part is harder for me. I came home from rehab, started putting my life back together, rebuilding my relationships with Michelle and my children. My church in Columbus was unbelievably gracious to me and allowed me to come in and continue ministry there. But about a year and a half later, a year and a half after rehab, on a Sunday morning, this was December of 2016, I came home from church after preaching that Sunday morning, and I came in with my son and quickly realized that our house had been robbed. About $12,000 worth of stuff was taken from our house. And so we called the police, and I called my insurance agent. We started dealing with all of that. A few days later, the police called me, informed me that they thought they had reclaimed our stuff, and they needed me to come down to the station to identify it. And I did, and most of our stuff was there, and I thanked the police, and they said, well, you're welcome, but we have a few follow-up questions. And they led me to an interview room, and they sat me down, and the first thing they did was read me my Miranda rights. And I was confused, didn't quite know what was going on, but long story short, they found the stuff that had been taken from our house with that young man that I had purchased those pain pills from years earlier. And his story was that I still owed him a drug debt and that I recruited him to stage a burglary so that I could claim insurance money and settle the drug debt. Now, I can tell you with every ounce of integrity I have left this morning that I did a lot of stupid things while I was using. But that was not one of them. That was not true. But in my efforts to convince the police of that, I did admit to purchasing drugs from him. And they did the math and realized that when I bought the drugs, he was underage. He was a minor. And that part was true. And every time I get to this part of the story, I'm embarrassed. I'm ashamed to tell you that this morning. I'm ashamed that that is part of my life story. I have always valued kids. I started ministry in children's ministry. And I hate that I negatively affected a young person like that by purchasing those pain pills. But I've also learned in recovery, you cannot hide from your past mistakes. You've got to own them, you've got to address them, you've got to make amends, and you've got to move forward. But I also knew there were consequences. And so in March of 2017, I was arrested at my home. I was charged with 2 felonies, insurance fraud, and contributing to the delinquency of a minor for purchasing those pain pills from him. Of course, I had to resign from my position at the church. We started making plans to move out of Columbus. I began working with a lawyer, trying to figure out what we were going to do. As the months passed, that insurance fraud charge was dropped, but I did plead guilty to the contributing charge, which is a Class C felony in the state of Indiana. The day before the sentencing hearing, so now we're at October of 2017, the day before, I asked my lawyer what I was facing. I knew it was a felony, but I said, tell me, just shoot straight, what am I looking at? And he continued to tell me, hey, you're looking at probation. This thing happened years ago. You went to rehab. You're trying to better yourself. You're trying to give back to the community, trying to be part of the solution. And I said, so you're telling me the judge is not sending me to prison? And he said, well, if she does, you'd be the first. Well, I was the first. The judge sentenced me to 7 years, 3 years in the Department of Corrections, and 4 years probation. I've got a new lawyer today, and he's done research, and he's told me that I'm the only one in the nation that has gone to prison for that charge. And I tell you that this morning, not so you'll feel sorry for me, not to play the victim. I was in the wrong. I'm the guilty one. and I deserve to be punished. I tell you that so you get a sense for my surprise when that was the sentence that was handed down. I mean, I woke up that morning of the sentencing hearing, didn't say goodbye to my kids because I thought I was coming home, just being placed on probation. But instead, I was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs and off to the county jail to begin serving my sentence. I ended up serving 15 months at the Putnamville Correctional Facility, a level 2 prison in Greencastle. Was released this past January. My time in prison is probably the subject of another time to share. All I would say is this. I had never seen hopelessness until I got to prison. And I've been all over the world. I've been to a lot of third world countries, seen a lot of tough places, but I have never seen sadness and pain and suffering and hopelessness like I had seen in the guys that I had met in prison. A couple weeks ago, there was a booth out for the Kairos ministry. I know Mount Gilead supports Kairos. I am so thankful for those guys. They are doing a great work. They're bringing light into a terribly dark situation. I met some great friends while I was there, learned some powerful lessons. Because when everything is stripped away from you, both literally and figuratively, you find out pretty quickly what kind of person you are and what kind of person you want to become. Been home for 8 months, and I'm thankful for my life. I'm thankful for my family, for my health. I'm still in recovery. I'm grateful for the people in my life, many who are in this room today, who still believed in me, who still supported me and my family, but I know I still have a long way to go. My life, even though I'm in recovery, my life is not perfect. It's not where I want it to be. I like the words of the John Mayer song, I'm in repair. I'm not together, but I'm getting there. And even though I'm not an expert on this topic, there are some things I've learned that I want to share as we start to wrap up this series this morning. When Jeff first asked me to preach several weeks ago, he told me he was calling this series Life Hacks. Life hacks. And he was going to talk about some different situations, loneliness, anxiety, depression, and addiction, different situations that unexpectedly hack our lives and change us. And I like that. That concept resonated with me. And as I thought about it, one thing came to the top of my mind, and it's this. I don't know if life hacked me or if I hacked my life, but either way, God is in control. And what I mean by that is this. Were there factors outside of my control that led me to addiction and led me to incarceration? Yes. Did I do most of the damage myself? Yes. But either way, and you can substitute whatever it is that you're struggling with in your life today. Either way, regardless of who's responsible, God's still on his throne. He's still in control. Psalm 27, verse 1 says this, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid?" You know, King David wrote that when his life was in trouble. When his life had been hacked, but it didn't crush him. Because he knew ultimately the Lord was his stronghold and would ultimately see him through. Listen, I know some of you today are in the midst of it. You are going through it right now. And I don't know what that looks like for you. I know some of you probably right now are struggling with an addiction, but maybe not. Maybe you're struggling with lust or anger or grief or worry or fear or regret. And you're going through it and you're just trying to keep your head above water. And in those moments, we start to wonder, where are you, God? What are you doing, God? Are you even there? Do you care? I don't feel you, God. And if you're there this morning, I would just say to you, you can't always trust your feelings, but you can always count on the truth. And the truth is, even when you can't feel God, He is on the move, fighting and working on our behalf. Revelation chapter 1, verse 17 says this. Then he placed his right hand on me and said, "Do not be afraid. I am the first and the last." Don't you sense the power coming out of that statement? I am the first and I'm the last. Friends, he is in control. Through the calm, through the storm. And if we believe that, if we truly believe that he is in control at all times, then secondly, we also have to believe that God can use my pain for good. That somehow, in some mysterious way, he's going to take my brokenness and your brokenness and do something great with it. And I don't know what that looks like, but one of the first things he does is he brings us closer together. That's one of the incredible ways that God uses our brokenness. He brings us closer together. Think about it. If you want to get close to somebody, you don't go up to that person and you don't say, "Hey, you remember back in high school, I was homecoming king, and I won by a landslide." You don't say that. If you want to be close to somebody, you don't go up to that person and say, "Hey, I just made a $100,000 bonus at work, and I'm having trouble knowing how to spend it." You don't say, "My kids are way smarter than your kids." We don't say things like that if we want to get close to someone, right? They'll walk away. They'll be repulsed. But if you want to get closer to somebody, you say something like, "I'm having some dark days. And I feel like I'm going through a bout of depression. I could use some prayer." Do you feel how the relationship changes? Or if you share, "My kid is going through X, Y, or Z. It is keeping me up at night. I am gripped with fear." I go home every night, and I just can't stop drinking. Right? As soon as I clock off, and so I go to bed tonight, and I just drink. And I need some help. If we start to get real and authentic and honest about our struggle, you might think that people will turn away. That's the lie that Satan wants us to believe, that people will turn away. But you know what I found? I found the opposite to be true. But the more I'm honest and real and transparent with my struggle, that somehow God brings us closer together. And I think the church, the capital C church, we could all use to get better at that. They say that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. If you're an addict here, if you're an alcoholic here today, you know what I'm talking about. Because when we use, we isolate. We don't want anybody to know. And I think we could substitute any addiction, any struggle, any hurt, any habit, and the opposite of that struggle is connection. And by the way, isn't God good? That not only would he give you and me talents and gifts and abilities and blessings to use to further his kingdom, but that he would also use our baggage and our fear and our failures and our mess-ups to somehow reflect the kingdom of God in a different way. I mean, isn't God good that he does that? But we shouldn't be surprised. Because from the beginning of history, God has made it clear that he is on a path to fix and restore and to heal all things. And if right now you are in a dark season of life and don't know where life is going and feel out of control and feel like no one understands, I want you to listen to these words from 1 Peter chapter 5. That the God of all grace, who called you to his eternal glory in Christ, after you have suffered a little while, will himself restore you and make you strong and firm and steadfast." And all God's people said. I got to tell you, when my life was good, when everything was put together, I would tell you, I thought that God did his best work on the mountaintop. But now I believe God does his best work in the valley, in the shadows, in the dark days of life. My name is Justin, and I'm an addict. And some of you might be too. In a sense, isn't that what sin is? Isn't sin just an addiction to doing things our way instead of God's? Maybe you're addicted to gossip, or to food, or to porn, or anger, or greed, or fear. In a sense, we're all addicts. But that's not all we are. We are children of God, the sheep of his pasture. We are the household of faith, brothers and sisters. We are the servants of the King, a King who loves us and who chases us down, who has a plan for us, who has promised that he will never leave us nor forsake us. No matter where life takes us, he is still the King, and his kingdom never ends.